What if I told you that for nearly 30 years, there was a maritime empire that controlled England, Denmark, Norway, and dominated North Sea trade, yet most people have never heard of it? This is the story of the North Sea Empire. The North Sea Empire was a union between the kingdoms of Denmark, England, and Norway, held together by one man. Well, three men, but not all at the same time. The first was the Viking warlord Sweyn Forkbeard. Sweyn seized the throne of Denmark from his esteemed father, Harald Bluetooth, around the year 986. After betraying his father, Forkbeard controlled the vast levies and strong huscarls of Denmark. So at the turn of the millennium, in the year 1000, the Viking king set sail to conquer Norway, beginning an epic saga that would change the history of Europe forever. So how did an empire rise from the waves of the North Sea, and how did it fall? Let's get into it. I'm Andrew. Welcome to Europa Historia. The mighty King Olaf was the first challenge standing in Forkbeard's way. In order to slay this giant of a man, Forkbeard allied himself with the King of Sweden, Olaf Eriksson, and a number of Norwegian jarls. The Scandinavian alliance ambushed the Norwegian king at sea with an overwhelming number of warships, outnumbering their enemy 7-1. The Battle of Svolder ensued, ending after King Olaf hurled himself into the sea from the helm of his legendary warship, Ormrin Langi, the Long Serpent. The victors proceeded to divide Norway amongst themselves. King Forkbeard received the vast majority of Norway and divided its districts amongst his vassals, effectively making him the new king of Norway, which he would rule in union with Denmark. Forkbeard, now battle-tested as a conqueror, set his eyes on a more valuable prize, England. The island of Great Britain had been the target of Viking raids for over 200 years. The rich, developed land was a jewel of immeasurable wealth. Many warlords from Scandinavia had attempted to conquer the petty kingdoms, only to fail and fall on a foreign shore, sent to the halls of the slain, Valhalla, by followers of a different god. Sweyn Forkbeard was the first Viking to succeed where his forefathers failed, taking the mantle as King of England in 1013. But it took him over a decade. Forkbeard's invasion of England began with a series of raids between the years 1002 and 1005. Some historians believe that these raids were rooted in a motivation beyond wealth, as in 1002, King Ethelred of the English ordered the mass slaying of Dane settlers, an event that is remembered as the St. Brice's Day Massacre. A legend from the sagas tells that Forkbeard's sister Gunhild was killed in the massacre, adding fuel to the flame of the oncoming Viking inferno. 11 years of battles, raids, and famine followed. It was during this long-winded carnage that Forkbeard's son, Canute, first distinguished himself as a competent commander and a fearless leader, despite only being a teenager. In the summer of 1013, Forkbeard and Canute personally led the full extent of their forces across England, marching from town to town, capturing hostages on the way to London. The great English city resisted fiercely. King Ethelred led the defense valiantly in an effort to preserve his kingdom. In order to put down this final resistance standing in the way of his conquest, Forkbeard used the ace up his sleeve, the English hostages. With the lives of their brethren threatened, the Londoners were forced to lay down their arms. King Ethelred fled to Normandy with his family, and Sweyn Forkbeard was declared King of England on Christmas Day in 1013. He was the first Dane to successfully conquer the throne of England, which he ruled in union with both Denmark and Norway, creating a maritime empire united by the North Sea. Though his reign would not last long, he died only 5 weeks later on February 3rd, 1014. The cause of death isn't known for sure. Some say he fell off a horse. Some legends say he was killed in his sleep by the ghost of St. Edmund. Whatever the case, his death left a power vacuum that needed to be filled quickly. Canute stepped up to fill the void left by his titan of a father, and the people of the Danelaw in England supported him, electing Canute as the king. This coincided with Canute's brother Harold being crowned King of Denmark back home. However, the English nobility had other plans. They used Forkbeard's death as an opportunity to seize back control of their country. The Witan recalled Ethelred from his exile in Normandy, and the re-crowned king led a swift force to strike against the Danes, driving them back to their boats and forcing them to retreat back to Denmark. Upon returning to his homeland, Canute attempted to persuade Harold to acknowledge his right to rule as co-king, but this request fell on deaf ears. Harold denied Canute, but gave him a warband of troops and ships to invade England and retake the throne their father seized by force. Canute agreed to this plan. In addition to his brother's forces, Canute found an ally in Duke Boleslaw the Brave of Poland, who would later be crowned King Boleslaw, the first monarch of Poland. In 1015, only a year after Canute was forced from England's shores, he set sail across the North Sea once again, this time with an enormous warband and a fleet of longships to match, all dedicated to the sole purpose of conquering England and killing Ethelred. The overwhelming might of Canute's forces were terrifying to behold. This wasn't a ragtag group of lowborn fighters. It was a strong army composed of seasoned veterans and bloodthirsty mercenaries. They were capable of fighting mercilessly on both land and sea. Before this terrifying force had even landed in England, the country's fate was all but sealed. Many earls defected from Ethelred upon seeing the hopelessness of their situation. Nevertheless, brutal warfare ensued for 2 years. The defense of England largely fell to the king's son, Edmund Ironside. He personally led England's forces in battle all across the country, from Northumbria to Wessex. He battled the Danes valiantly. After the death of Ethelred, due to natural causes, in the spring of 1016, Edmund took up his father's crown, vowing to defend the kingdom of his father. The culmination of Canute's invasion occurred in October of 1016, at the Battle of Ascension. King Edmund led a surprise attack against Canute's forces, who were attempting to rest and recoup after a series of brutal engagements. Despite the surprise, Canute's forces decisively beat Edmund, wounding him and forcing an all-out retreat. Edmund's gamble had cost him greatly, and upon realizing the dire straits he found himself in, he agreed to meet with Canute and discuss possible peace terms. Edmund agreed to give up all of England's land north of the Thames River, except London. This agreement would have allowed Edmund to keep his crown and all of the land south of the Thames, but only a few weeks later, King Edmund Ironside would die at the young age of 25 due to unknown causes. His death allowed Canute to claim all of England for himself, and in January of 1017, Canute of the Yelling dynasty was crowned monarch of England at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. King Canute was said to have ruled England wisely. His organization of the country into 4 earldoms under the rule of loyal followers allowed for a period of peace and stability unseen in England for centuries. Raids on the country had all but stopped due to Canute's strong standing army, which he was able to afford due to the economic prosperity brought about by his rule. After a short period of Dane-dominated politics, he allowed local English nobility to reclaim positions of power, furthering the region's stability and trust in their newfound king. One of these nobles was named Godwin, a Sussex-born Englishman whose ascension to the earldom of Wessex would begin a series of events that would eventually lead to Harold Godwinson fighting William, Duke of Normandy, at the Battle of Hastings in 50 years' time. A year after Canute's ascension in 1018, his brother, King Harold of Denmark, died due to unknown causes. Canute sailed home to assert his claimed birthright, and in 1019, he was proclaimed King of Denmark, which he would rule in union with England. It's worth mentioning that the deceased King Harold had lost control of Norway to Olaf Haraldsson in 1015. Olaf united most of Norway under his own banner, an act Canute wouldn't forget. After spending a year cementing his control of Denmark, Canute set sail back to England, leaving his sister's husband, Earl Ulf, to preside over Denmark as regent, as well as mentor to Canute's son and heir, Harthacnut. Canute spent his time sailing back and forth between England and Denmark, dealing with whatever uprising or infighting between nobles seemed to arise. However, Canute favored time in his English court, most likely due to the obscene amount of wealth he was pulling from the country. In 1026, King Olaf of Norway took advantage of Canute's absence from Denmark and allied himself with King Anund Jakob of Sweden. They attacked Danish holdings along the coast in an effort to weaken the strength of a common enemy that had projected power over them for too long. Earl Ulf took it upon himself to betray his brother-in-law Canute by convincing the local Danish powers to support the young Harthacnut as their king, effectively giving Ulf control of Denmark since he was acting regent. King Canute was infuriating by the happenings in Scandinavia. His holdings were being ransacked by Vikings, and his son was being used as a pawn. He set sail at once, determined to vanquish his foes and put a stop to the petty Game of Thrones being conducted by his most trusted advisor. It's unclear as to how exactly Canute reclaimed his throne in Denmark, but he did, and he didn't blame Harthacnut or hold him responsible for the treachery of Ulf. But he also didn't punish or kill Ulf, choosing to let him live, at least for the time being. The Battle of the Helgi against Olaf and Anund was fought shortly after, and Earl Ulf was apparently instrumental in the Danish victory over Norway and Sweden. The decision to let Ulf live seemed a good one, at least until Christmas of that same year, when Canute sent a huskarl to murder Ulf. Some legends say that the killing was in retribution for an argument that arose during a game of chess. Anyways, the Battle of the Helgi was instrumental in Canute establishing himself as hegemon in Scandinavia. In 1027, Canute received an invitation to Rome in order to attend the coronation of the Holy Roman Emperor, Conrad II. In medieval Europe, the coronation of Holy Roman Emperor was the grandest event one could attend. Only the elite of the elite were invited. Canute's invitation signifies that he wasn't a mere regional power. In the eyes of his contemporaries, which were few, Canute was a force to be respected. Canute accepted the invitation and traveled to the Holy City. It was said that he used it as an opportunity to repent for the sin of ordering the killing of his brother-in-law Ulf. He also sought an audience with Pope John XIX, using his status to negotiate terms of safer passage and reduced tolls for English and Danish pilgrims on the road to Rome. This journey solidified Canute's renown as a just Christian monarch in the eyes of medieval Europe. Emperor Conrad is said to have particularly enjoyed Canute's company. The two rulers were of the same age and got along famously. This is evidenced by Conrad's decision to give Canute territory in the borderlands between Schleswig and mainland Europe, seemingly just out of goodwill. At the actual coronation of Conrad, King Canute stood side by side with the newly crowned emperor, a gesture that symbolized their newfound friendship and Canute's standing as one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. Canute left Rome empowered and diplomatically victorious. It's clear that his bravado as a warrior was matched by his skill as a politician. In his 1027 letter, he detailed the plan for his growing realm, emphasizing the importance of securing peace with Denmark's Scandinavian neighbors. One way or another, he would achieve it. In 1028, Canute set sail from England with a fleet of 50 ships. Their destination was Trondheim in Norway, where King Olaf, the same Olaf who attacked Denmark 2 years earlier, was residing amongst a discontent population. Canute reached Trondheim expecting a battle, but found little resistance. The nobility of Norway were happy to dispose of Olaf. Olaf escaped into exile, running east to find safe harbor with the lords of the Kievan Rus. Nevertheless, Canute was now officially the king of Norway, as well as the king of both Denmark and England. The great North Sea Empire, first established by his father Sweyn Forkbeard, was now restored, this time more powerful than ever. The Anglo-Scandinavian Union was the culmination of the Viking Age. Over 200 years of fighting, raiding, and culture exchange resulted in a maritime empire rich in wealth and manpower. Though this thalassocracy was never an official empire, the only things conjoining the kingdoms were the king himself and the North Sea. Still, Canute's union had all the makings of an empire, and his renown amongst the leaders of Europe put him on a near equal footing with the Holy Roman Emperor himself. In addition to the kingdoms he directly held, Canute's influence extended to the rest of the British Isles and the Baltic Sea. As we mentioned earlier, Canute was allied with King Boleslaw of Poland and the Pius dynasty. The Dukes of Normandy, being of Viking descent and fathered by the famed Scandinavian warlord Rollo, were also allies of Canute. The power of Canute's forces alone were overwhelming. When combined with the strength of his allies, he was nearly unstoppable. His might allowed him to subjugate a number of tributary states, who paid him tribute as their de facto overlord. These tributaries included the Western Slavic tribes in northern Germany, the Welsh Highlands, the upland region of Sweden, the petty kingdoms of Ireland. The greatest of Canute's tributaries were the kings of Scotland. In either 1027 or 1031, Canute personally traveled to the northern kingdoms and bloodlessly subjugated the three Scottish rulers, Malcolm of Alba, Ragnall the Sea King of the Isles, and the warlord Macbeth. With Ireland, Wales, and Scotland largely subjugated, Canute was the de facto overlord of the entire British Isles. His control over land and sea was truly unrivaled. Cnut the Great's power is best symbolized in the tale of him resisting the tides by Henry Huntington. When he was at the height of his ascendancy, Canute ordered his chair to be placed on the seashore, as the tide was coming in. Then he said to the rising tide, "You are subject to me, as the land on which I am sitting is mine, and no one has resisted my overlordship with impunity. I command you, therefore, not to rise on my land, nor to presume to wet the clothing or limbs of your master." But the sea came up as usual, and disrespectfully drenched the king's feet and shins. So jumping back, the king cried, "Let all the world know that the power of kings is empty and worthless, and there is no king worthy of the name save him, by whose will heaven, earth, and the sea obey eternal laws." This most likely fictional story emphasizes Canute's grandeur, as well as his recorded devotion to Christianity. The debate as to whether he was truly devout or simply using religion as a means to an end are ongoing. Canute's reign lasted 19 years, before dying at age 40 to natural causes on November 12, 1035, in Shaftesbury, England. He was interred at the Old Minster Cathedral in Winchester. One of the greatest questions in European history is, what would the world look like if Canute had lived a full life? If he had survived, say, another 10 years, there likely wouldn't have been a Norman conquest, and William the Bastard likely would have never become William the Conqueror. But alas, Cnut the Great's story ended, and the succession of his realm fell to Harthacnut. But the North Sea Empire might as well have ended with Canute. His sons would find their father's crown too heavy to carry. The burden of empire would crush them entirely. Harthacnut was presiding as king in Denmark at the time of his father's death, making the transition from father to son easy enough for the Danes to accept. The kingdoms of Norway and England were another story. In the year prior to Canute's death, the nobles of Norway had forced Elfgifu, Canute's first wife, and Sweyn, Canute's son by her, to abandon their regency over Norway in favor of Magnus Olafsson, the son of the previously disposed King Olaf. Harthacnut waged a war against Magnus to reclaim his expected birthright, but this angered the English, who had no reason to accept the rule of a king engaged in affairs across the sea. The English needed a leader on English soil, so they agreed to accept Harthacnut's half-brother, Harold Harefoot, as their regent. Harold was the second son of Canute by Elfgifu. She had no allegiance to Harthacnut, who was the son of Emma of Normandy, Canute's second wife and widow to Ethelred. Since Harthacnut's war in Scandinavia was taking too long for the English, Elfgifu took advantage of their angst and convinced the nobles to crown her son Harold as King of England, who then sent Emma into exile. Harthacnut planned to reward his half-brother's treachery with a full-scale invasion of England, not seen since Canute's conquest decades earlier. But there was no need, as in 1040, King Harold Harefoot died of a mysterious illness, some attributed to divine reckoning. Harthacnut's claim to the throne of England was now unopposed, as Sweyn had died unexpectedly years before. Harthacnut sought peace with Norway, allowing him to focus on securing England's crown and consolidating his power in Denmark. Harthacnut reached England's shores with a fleet of 62 longships during the summer of 1040. The war party was unneeded, as the English accepted their new king without issue. The union between Denmark and England was now restored, but Norway would be forever lost. Emma of Normandy's position of power in England was also restored, and she returned with a score to settle. Before Harold had died, Emma's son by Ethelred, Alfred, had attempted to wrest control of England's throne with a mercenary force supplied by Normandy. Alfred was betrayed by Godwin, his stepfather's most trusted ally, and brought before Harold. Alfred was violently blinded by Harold's instruction, and he died from his wounds shortly after. Emma was obviously distraught at the death of her son, and Harthacnut was furious that his half-brother killed his other half-brother. So, the newly crowned king ordered the body of Harold to be unearthed and thrown into the River Thames. Medieval European society placed a great deal of importance in sanctified burials, especially for royal lineage. This act of debauchery was seen as horrific and crude, no matter the reasoning behind it. Unfortunately, this would not be the last shameful act that the king would commit in the eyes of the English. Harthacnut was said to have been a ruthless king, who placed greater importance on the finer things in life than effectively ruling a kingdom. For an empire composed of many varying cultures with an ocean dividing them, this was not a recipe for success. The nobles of England quickly grew to dislike their new ruler, and the nobles back in Denmark grew tired of following a man who no longer resided amongst them. Harthacnut might have grown as a ruler over time, but time was not a gift he had to spare. The king had suffered from various illnesses since he was a boy, and there's reason to believe that he knew his life was going to come to a premature end. In 1041, the king sent for his only living half-brother, Edward, son of Emma and Ethelred, to return from his exile in Normandy. Upon Edward's arrival, Harthacnut declared him to be his successor. Some historians debate whether or not this was the king's personal decision or a condition thrust upon him by England's most powerful nobles. It was certainly odd given the king's temperament and young age. A year later, in the summer of 1042, King Harthacnut's story ended, during the midst of a close friend's wedding. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle says that Harthacnut died as he stood at his drink, and he suddenly fell to the earth with an awful convulsion, and those who were close by took hold of him, and he spoke no word afterwards. It seems as if a stroke took his life, but there's no way to be sure. The North Sea Empire died with him. England itself passed to Edward the Confessor and would never again be ruled by a Dane. But the Kingdom of Denmark would be united with Norway once again under King Magnus the Good. Harthacnut had promised Denmark's crown to Magnus before he set sail for England. Even though Denmark was the only throne assured to Magnus, that didn't stop him from claiming the rest of the empire. In a letter to Edward, Magnus proclaimed, "I will take possession of all the Danish Empire, or else die in the attempt." To which Edward replied, "You can never be called king in England, and you will never be granted any allegiance there before you put an end to my life." Magnus would never sit on the throne of England, but his claim would pass to his uncle, Harold Hardrada, and be used as the pretext to invade England in 1066, resulting in the famous Battle of Stamford Bridge. Edward the Confessor's reign in England would also end in a succession dispute that would reach its climax at the Battle of Hastings, a turning point in Europe's history for many reasons. Although it only lasted a short 29 years, the North Sea Empire changed the course of Europe's history. At its height, during the reign of Canute the Great, it was the most powerful union in Europe besides the Holy Roman Empire. Canute himself was the most feared warlord on land and sea. He was a legendary Viking who carved out an empire from the frigid waves of the North Sea, which only he alone could command. England, Denmark, and Norway could have potentially been united if he had lived a full life. Nevertheless, the passing of the North Sea Empire and the subsequent Norman invasion of England marked the end of the Viking Age and the beginning of Great Britain's rise to global dominance. And it all started because a guy with a fork-like beard stabbed his father in the back. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like this video, consider hitting that like button, smashing that subscribe button, or leaving a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how the world might look today if the North Sea Empire lasted. Anyways, I've been your host, Andrew, and I'll see y'all in the next episode of Europa Historia.